The luxury starship Golden Phoenix floated silently through the dark void of space, its polished hull reflecting the distant stars. Inside the massive vessel, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and soft music played through hidden speakers. Rich passengers walked through the corridors wearing expensive clothes and talking about their important business deals. Jake Morrison adjusted his crisp uniform and checked his reflection in the polished wall. At 28 years old, he thought, he was the most important person on the ship after the captain. His job as head flight attendant gave him power over the passengers, and he loved using that power. Jake had worked on luxury starships for 5 years, and he believed he could tell exactly what kind of person someone was just by looking at them. The boarding alarm chimed softly, and Jake walked to the main entrance with a fake smile on his face. He loved greeting the wealthy passengers because they always tipped well and treated him with respect. Today's passenger list included some very important people. Ryan Palmer, the tech billionaire who owned half the computer companies in the galaxy, was flying to a business meeting. Victoria Hayes, the famous socialite whose family controlled the biggest mining operations in 3-star systems, was traveling to attend a charity event. Jake watched as the expensive passengers walked up the boarding ramp. Ryan Palmer stepped aboard first, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Jake bowed slightly and said in his most professional voice, "Welcome aboard the Golden Phoenix, Mr. Palmer. Your suite is ready, and we have prepared your favorite meal." Victoria Hayes followed, her diamond jewelry sparkling under the ship's lights. Her assistant carried several bags that looked like they contained enough clothes for a month. Jake smiled widely and said, "Ms. Hayes, what an honor to have you with us again. I trust your journey to the Centauri system will be pleasant." Several more wealthy passengers boarded, each receiving Jake's best treatment. He remembered their names, their favorite drinks, and exactly how they liked their rooms prepared. This was the kind of passenger he enjoyed serving. Then everything changed. A man walked up the boarding ramp wearing old blue jeans with small holes in the knees. His leather jacket looked like it had seen better days, and his simple black boots were worn from years of use. He carried a small bag that looked like it came from a regular store, not one of the expensive shops that rich people used. His dark hair was a little messy, and he had a few days of beard growth on his face. Jake's smile disappeared immediately. This person clearly did not belong on a luxury starship. The man must have won his ticket in some kind of contest, or maybe he was flying on charity money. Either way, Jake decided he would make sure this passenger knew his place. The man approached Jake with a calm expression and handed over his ticket. Jake looked at it and saw that it was indeed a first-class ticket, but he figured there had to be some mistake. Maybe the man had stolen it, or maybe someone was playing a joke. "Name?" Jake asked in a cold voice, very different from the warm tone he had used with the other passengers. "John," the man replied quietly. His voice was steady and kind, but Jake was not impressed. "John what?" Jake demanded, not bothering to hide his annoyance. "Just John is fine," the man said with a small smile. Jake looked at the ticket again and saw the name J. Reeves printed on it. He had never heard of anyone important with that name, which meant this person was definitely not worth his time. "Listen, John," Jake said, making the name sound like an insult. "I think there might be some confusion here. This is a luxury starship, not a regular passenger transport. The tickets are very expensive, and I'm not sure you understand what kind of place this is." John looked around at the beautiful interior of the ship and nodded. "It's very nice," he said simply. Other passengers were starting to notice the conversation. Ryan Palmer had stopped walking and was watching with interest. Victoria Hayes whispered something to her assistant while looking at John with curiosity. Jake felt embarrassed that the important passengers were seeing him deal with someone who clearly did not belong. He decided to handle the situation quickly and firmly. "Sir, I'm going to need to verify this ticket, Jake said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. We've had problems with fake tickets before, and I want to make sure everything is legitimate. John remained calm and patient. Of course. Please check whatever you need to check. Jake took the ticket to his desk and pretended to run it through the verification system, even though he could see it was completely valid. The system showed that the ticket had been purchased 6 months ago and paid for in full. There was nothing wrong with it at all. But Jake was not ready to give up. He walked back to John and said, "The ticket appears to be real, but I'm still concerned. Are you sure you can afford the additional services? The meals alone cost more than most people." "Make it a week. I'll be fine," John said quietly. "Well, I suppose we have to let you board," Jake said with obvious reluctance. "But I want to make sure you understand the rules. This is not like flying on a regular ship. We expect our passengers to dress appropriately and behave in a certain way. I hope you brought some better clothes." John looked down at his simple outfit and then back at Jake. "These are the only clothes I have with me." Jake shook his head in disgust. "I was afraid of that." "Well, try to stay out of the way of the other passengers. They're here on important business, and they don't need to be bothered by ... double quotes. He paused and looked John up and down. ... by whatever situation brought you here." Dr. Amanda Foster, a famous scientist who was standing nearby, frowned at Jake's rude behavior. She had been listening to the conversation and felt uncomfortable with how Jake was treating the quiet man. "Excuse me," Dr. Foster said to Jake. "Is there a problem here?" Jake immediately changed his attitude when he saw Dr. Foster. She was well known and respected, and he did not want to offend her. "No problem at all, Dr. Foster," Jake said with his fake smile returning. "I was just helping this passenger understand our policies." Dr. Foster looked at John, who gave her a gentle nod. Something about the man seemed familiar to her, but she could not remember where she might have seen him before. "I'm sure he'll be fine," Dr. Foster said firmly. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect." Jake's face turned red, but he nodded quickly. "Of course, Dr. Foster. I was just doing my job." John picked up his small bag and started walking toward the first-class section. Jake watched him go and decided that this passenger was going to be a problem. He would make sure that John understood exactly where he stood on this ship. The Golden Phoenix had been traveling through hyperspace for 3 hours when Jake Morrison decided to check on his passengers. He walked through the first-class section with his usual fake smile, stopping to chat with the wealthy travelers and making sure they had everything they needed. When he reached Ryan Palmer's seat, the tech billionaire was working on a holographic display that showed complex business charts. Jake bowed slightly and asked, "Is there anything I can get for you, Mr. Palmer? Perhaps some of that expensive wine you enjoyed on your last trip?" Ryan looked up and smiled. "That would be perfect, Jake. You always remember the details." Jake felt proud of himself. This was how passengers should treat him, with respect and appreciation. He moved on to Victoria Hayes, who was reading a digital magazine about fashion trends on distant planets. "Ms. Hayes, how are you finding the journey so far?" Jake asked in his most professional voice. "Wonderful as always," Victoria replied. "The service on this ship is usually excellent." Jake noticed that she said usually instead of always, and he wondered if she was thinking about the scene at the boarding area. He decided he needed to make sure she understood that the situation was under control. "I apologize if there was any unpleasantness during boarding," Jake said quietly. "We sometimes get passengers who are not familiar with our standards. I assure you it won't be a problem." Victoria looked at him with a strange expression. "The man seemed perfectly polite to me." Before Jake could respond, his colleague Danny Clark approached him. Danny was younger than Jake and had only been working on luxury ships for 2 years. He looked up to Jake and usually followed his lead in everything. "Hey Jake, Danny whispered. "What's the deal with the guy in seat 12A? He looks like he belongs in economy class, not up here with the important people." Jake glanced toward the back of the first-class section where John was sitting quietly by the window. The man was looking out at the swirling colors of hyperspace with a calm expression on his face. "That's exactly what I was thinking," Jake said quietly. "I think he won his ticket somehow, or maybe he's flying on charity money. Either way, we need to make sure he doesn't bother the real passengers." Danny nodded eagerly. "What should we do?" "Follow my lead," Jake said with a mean smile. The two flight attendants walked over to John's seat. The man looked up at them with the same patient expression he had shown during boarding. "Sir," Jake said loudly, making sure other passengers could hear, "I need to discuss the meal service with you. The first-class menu includes some very expensive items, and I want to make sure you understand the additional costs." John looked confused. "I thought meals were included with the ticket." "Well, yes," Jake said, "but some items have extra charges. The real caviar, for example, costs an additional 200 credits. The imported steaks are 300 credits each. I just want to make sure you can afford these things before you order them." This was completely untrue. All meals were included in first-class tickets, and there were never any additional charges. But Jake wanted to embarrass John in front of the other passengers. "I see," John said quietly. "What would you recommend?" Danny jumped in, trying to impress Jake. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable with the basic options. We have some simple sandwiches that won't cost extra." Dr. Amanda Foster, who was sitting 2 rows ahead, turned around in her seat. She had been listening to the conversation and was getting angry about how the flight attendants were treating John. "Excuse me," Dr. Foster said firmly. "Since when? Are there additional charges for meals in first class? I've flown on this ship many times, and everything has always been included." Jake's face turned red. He had not expected anyone to challenge him. "Well, Dr. Foster, there are some new policies for certain types of passengers." "What types of passengers?" Dr. Foster asked, her voice getting louder. Before Jake could answer, the ship's intercom system crackled to life. Captain Lisa Wong's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We will be serving lunch in 30 minutes. As always, all meals and beverages are completely included in your first-class ticket price. There are no additional charges for any items on our menu." The timing could not have been worse for Jake. Several passengers were now looking at him with suspicion and disapproval. He realized he had been caught in a lie. I must have been thinking of a different ship," Jake stammered. John looked at Jake with a sad expression. "It's okay," he said gently. "Everyone makes mistakes." This kindness made Jake even angrier. He did not want pity from someone he considered beneath him. "Right," Jake said coldly. "Well, let me know if you need anything. Simple." As they walked away, Danny whispered to Jake, "That was close. The doctor almost caused real trouble." "Don't worry about it," Jake replied. "We'll find other ways to put him in his place." 20 minutes later, Jake and Danny returned with lunch trays for the passengers. They served Ryan Palmer first, bringing him a perfectly prepared steak with expensive wine. Victoria Hayes received her meal next, fresh lobster with rare vegetables that cost more than most people's monthly salary. When they reached John's seat, Jake was carrying a tray with a cold sandwich and a cup of water. "Here's your meal, sir," Jake said, setting the tray down roughly so that some of the water spilled. John looked at the simple meal and then at the elaborate dishes the other passengers were enjoying. "This looks different from what everyone else is having." "Well," Jake said with false innocence, "you seemed concerned about costs, so I brought you something more appropriate for your situation." Dr. Foster had been watching the whole time. She stood up and walked over to John's seat. "This is ridiculous," she said angrily. "You deserve the same meal as everyone else." She turned to Jake. "Bring this man a proper first-class meal right now." "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding," Jake said, trying to sound professional while other passengers stared at him. "The only misunderstanding," Dr. Foster said loudly, "is your attitude toward this passenger. He has the same ticket as everyone else, and he deserves the same treatment." Meanwhile, up on the bridge of the ship, Captain Lisa Wong was reading a priority message that had just arrived through the quantum communication system. The message was marked with the highest security classification she had ever seen. As she read the contents, her hands began to shake. The message contained information about one of her passengers, someone whose identity was so classified that even she was not supposed to know about it. The message began, "Priority alert. Passenger protection protocol activated. Subject aboard. Your vessel requires maximum security. Identity, ultra black classification. Threat level, galactic." Captain Wong looked at the passenger manifest and cross-referenced it with the names in the classified message. When she found the match, she had to read it 3 times to believe it. The humble man in seat 12A, the one her flight attendant was treating so poorly, was possibly the most important human being alive. Back in the passenger cabin, John quietly ate his cold sandwich while the argument continued around him. He seemed completely unbothered by the poor treatment, as if he had experienced much worse things in his life, but Dr. Foster was not ready to let the matter drop. Something about John reminded her of someone she had seen before, someone important. She could not remember where or when, but she was determined to figure it out. As the Golden Phoenix continued its journey through hyperspace, none of the passengers knew that they were traveling with a man whose true identity would soon change everything. The Golden Phoenix was traveling peacefully through hyperspace when the emergency alarms suddenly began to sound. Red lights flashed throughout the ship, and the gentle hum of the engines changed to a loud grinding noise. Passengers looked around nervously as the ship shook and vibrated. Captain Lisa Wong's voice came over the intercom system, but she sounded worried. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some technical difficulties. Please remain in your seats and fasten your safety belts. We will have more information shortly." The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a violent jolt that threw passengers against their seats. Through the large windows, they could see normal stars again instead of the swirling colors of hyperspace travel. But something was wrong. The stars looked different, and there was a large dark shape blocking some of them. Jake Morrison was in the galley preparing afternoon drinks when the alarm started. He grabbed onto a counter to keep from falling as the ship shook. Danny Clark was with him, and both men looked scared. "What's happening?" Danny asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Jake replied, "but we need to keep the passengers calm. The last thing we need is panic." They walked quickly into the passenger area, where people were talking nervously and looking out the windows. Ryan Palmer was trying to use his communication device, but it was not working. Victoria Hayes was holding onto her seat with white knuckles. "Everyone please stay calm," Jake announced, trying to sound professional. "The captain will give us more information soon." Dr. Amanda Foster was looking out the window with a worried expression. She was a scientist who had studied space travel for many years, and she knew that dropping out of hyperspace unexpectedly was never a good sign. John was still sitting quietly in his seat, but now he was looking out the window with great interest. Unlike the other passengers, he did not seem scared or nervous. Instead, he looked like he was studying something carefully. Suddenly, the dark shape outside the window began to move. It was not a space station or an asteroid. It was a ship, but unlike any ship the passengers had ever seen. It was enormous, at least 10 times larger than the Golden Phoenix. Its hull was black and covered with strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. The alien ship moved closer to the Golden Phoenix, and the passengers could see that it had weapon ports along its sides. Some of the weapons were already glowing with energy, Ready to fire. Captain Wong's voice came over the intercom again, and this time she could not hide her fear. Ladies and gentlemen, we have encountered an unknown vessel. We are trying to establish communication. Please remain calm and stay in your seats. Jake looked at the alien ship and felt his knees go weak. He had heard stories about hostile aliens, but he had never expected to encounter them personally. He looked around the passenger cabin and saw that everyone was scared. Everyone except John. The quiet man was still studying the alien ship carefully. He seemed to be counting the weapon ports and examining the design of the hull. Jake noticed that John's calm behavior was very different from everyone else's panic. "Hey you," Jake said harshly, walking over to John's seat. "What are you looking at? This is a dangerous situation, and you're just sitting there like nothing is happening." John looked up at Jake with a patient expression. "Panicking won't help anyone." "Well, maybe you should be more concerned," Jake said loudly. "These aliens might kill us all, and you're acting like this is normal." Danny joined Jake, trying to look tough even though he was clearly terrified. "Yeah, maybe you should be more worried about what's going to happen to us." Dr. Foster was still looking out the window, but she was also listening to Jake's conversation with John. Something about the way John was studying the alien ship reminded her of something, but she could not remember what. The alien ship suddenly sent out a bright beam of light that scanned the Golden Phoenix from front to back. The beam passed through the ship like it was made of glass, and the passengers could feel a strange tingling sensation as it touched them. After the scan was complete, a voice came through the ship's communication system. But it was not Captain Wong's voice. It was something else, something that sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Human vessel," the alien voice said. "We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have scanned your ship and detected the presence of the one we seek. Surrender the human architect, and the rest of you will be spared." The passengers looked around at each other in confusion. None of them knew what a human architect was or who the aliens were looking for. Jake felt a moment of relief. If the aliens were looking for someone specific, maybe they would just take that person and leave everyone else alone. He looked around the passenger cabin, trying to figure out who the aliens might want. "They're probably looking for someone important," Jake said to Danny. "Maybe Mr. Palmer or Ms. Hayes. Those are the only people on this ship who matter." "But," Ryan Palmer shook his head, "I'm just a businessman. I don't know anything about architecture." Victoria Hayes looked equally confused. "I work in mining. I don't know why aliens would want me." The alien voice came through the communication system again. "We know the architect is aboard this vessel. We have been hunting him for many years. He is responsible for the death of millions of our warriors. Surrender him now, or we will destroy your ship and everyone on it." Jake's mind was racing. If the aliens were looking for someone who had killed millions of their people, it had to be someone with military experience. He looked around at the passengers again, but none of them looked like soldiers or generals. Then Jake had a terrible idea. What if the aliens were confused? What if they thought the wrong person was the architect they were looking for? His eyes fell on John, who was still sitting calmly and studying the alien ship. "Wait a minute," Jake said loudly, pointing at John. "What if they're looking for him? I mean, he's been acting strange this whole time. Maybe he's not who he says." "He is," Danny nodded eagerly. "Yeah, that makes sense. He doesn't belong here anyway. Maybe he's some kind of criminal or something." Dr. Foster turned around and stared at Jake in disbelief. "Are you seriously suggesting we hand over a passenger to hostile aliens?" "I'm just saying," Jake replied. "If they want someone specific and we give them the right person, maybe they'll leave the rest of us alone." John looked at Jake with a sad expression. "You would really give me to them to save yourselves?" "If it means protecting the important people on this ship," Jake said, "then yes." But Dr. Foster was not going to let this happen. She stood up and walked over to John's seat. No one is handing anyone over to aliens. We're all humans here, and we stick together. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Golden Phoenix, Captain Wong was reading the classified file about her mysterious passenger. The more she read, the more amazed she became. The file contained information about battles, strategies, and defensive systems that had saved human colonies throughout the galaxy. The man sitting quietly in first class was not just any architect. He was the architect of humanity's survival in a hostile universe. And now the aliens had found him. The Zephyrian ship moved even closer to the Golden Phoenix, and more weapon ports began to glow with deadly energy. The aliens were running out of patience. John looked out at the alien ship and sighed quietly. He had hoped to travel in peace, but it seemed that peace was not something he would ever truly have. He reached into his small bag and pulled out a device that looked like a simple communication pad. But when he turned it on, the screen showed complex military information and tactical displays that no civilian should have access to. Dr. Foster saw the device, and her eyes went wide. Suddenly, she remembered where she had seen John before. Was not in person, but in classified research presentations about humanity's greatest military achievements. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're him. You're really him." The massive Zephyrian warship moved closer to the Golden Phoenix, its dark hull blocking out the stars. Inside the alien vessel, Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge, studying the human ship through his tactical display. His skin was gray and covered with scales, and his 4 arms moved quickly across the control panels. "Commander," Vextar said to his second-in-command, "are you certain the architect is aboard that vessel?" "Yes, Admiral," the commander replied. "Our deep space sensors detected his unique energy signature. After 5 years of hunting, we have finally found him." Vextar's eyes glowed with satisfaction. The human they called the architect had been responsible for designing the defense systems that had stopped 3 separate Zephyrian invasions. Millions of Zephyrian warriors had died trying to break through his barriers and shields. If they could capture or kill him, humanity's defenses would crumble. "Open a communication channel," Vextar ordered. Back on the Golden Phoenix, the passengers were still trying to understand what was happening. The aliens had demanded the surrender of someone called the Human Architect, but nobody knew who. That was. Jake Morrison was convinced that John was somehow involved. The quiet man's calm behavior in the face of danger seemed suspicious, and Jake was desperate to find someone to blame for their situation. "Look at him," Jake said to Danny, pointing at John. "Everyone else is scared, but he's just sitting there like this happens every day. Maybe he knows something we don't." Danny nodded nervously. "You think he's working with the aliens?" "I don't know," Jake replied, "but I think we should find out." Dr. Amanda Foster was still staring at John with wide eyes. She had finally remembered where she had seen him before. It was in a classified briefing about humanity's most important military leaders. The man sitting quietly in seat 12A was not just any architect. He was the most famous military genius in human history. "John," Dr. Foster said quietly, "I know who you are." John looked at her with a tired expression. "I was hoping to travel without anyone recognizing me." "You're John Connor Reeves, Doctor," Foster whispered. "You're the one who designed the Terran defense grid. You're the architect they're looking for." Before John could respond, the alien voice came through the communication system again. This time, Admiral Vextar spoke directly. "To the passengers, humans of the Golden Phoenix," the alien commander said, "we know the architect is among you. He is the one who has killed millions of our people with his clever traps and deadly weapons. We have been hunting him across the galaxy for 5 years. Give him to us, and we will let the rest of you live." Jake's eyes lit up with hope. If they could identify the architect and hand him over, everyone else would be safe. He looked around the passenger cabin, trying to figure out which person the aliens wanted. It has to be someone important, Jake said loudly. Mr. Palmer, you're a tech genius. Could you be the architect they're talking about? Ryan Palmer shook his head quickly. I make computer programs, not weapons. I've never even been in the military. Jake turned to Victoria Hayes. What about you? Your family has connections to the government. I run mining operations, Victoria said. I don't know anything about military architecture. Jake was getting frustrated. The aliens were looking for someone specific, but none of the important passengers seemed to be the right person. Then he looked at John again, and a terrible idea began to form in his mind. Wait, Jake said, walking over to John's seat. What if it's him? Dr. Foster stepped between Jake and John. Stop right there. You don't know what you're talking about. Think about it, Jake continued. He's been acting strange since he got on the ship. He doesn't belong here. Maybe he's the one the aliens want. Danny joined Jake, looking excited. That would make sense. I mean, look at him. He's obviously not a normal passenger. John looked up at Jake with a sad expression. You really think I'm your enemy? I think you're hiding something, Jake said. And if giving you to the aliens will save the rest of us, then that's what we should do. The other passengers were watching the argument with shock. Ryan Palmer stood up and said, You can't seriously be suggesting we hand over another human being to hostile aliens. If it saves our lives, Jake replied, then yes, I am. Victoria. Hayes looked disgusted. That's the most cowardly thing I've ever heard. But Jake was not listening to them. He was focused on his own survival, and he thought he had found a solution. Look, Jake said to the other passengers, we don't even know who this guy really is. He could be anyone. He could be a criminal or a terrorist. Why should we risk our lives for him? Dr. Foster had heard enough. His name is John Connor Reeves, she announced loudly. He's the greatest military strategist in human history. He's the one who designed the defense systems that have kept Earth safe from alien invasion for the past 10 years. The passenger cabin became completely silent. Everyone stared at John with new understanding. That's right, Dr. Foster continued. The man you've been treating like garbage is the reason humanity is still alive. Jake's face went pale. That's impossible. Look at him. He's just some guy in old clothes. Some guy? Dr. Foster said angrily. He saved more human lives than anyone else in history. The Terran Defense Grid, the Quantum Shield Network, the Victory-class battle stations, he designed all of them. John finally spoke up. Dr. Foster, please. I was trying to travel quietly. Why? She asked. You should be honored and respected everywhere you go. John looked out at the alien warship. Because this is what happens when people know who I am. The aliens have been hunting me for years. Everyone around me gets put in danger. Admiral Vextar's voice came through the communication system again. We grow tired of waiting. You have 60 seconds to surrender the architect, or we will destroy your ship. Captain Lisa Wong's voice immediately followed. All passengers, this is your captain. We are not surrendering anyone to the aliens. Prepare for possible combat. Jake panicked. Combat? This is a luxury ship, not a warship. We can't fight them. John quietly reached into his bag and pulled out what looked like a simple handheld computer. But when he activated it, the screen showed complex military data and tactical information. Actually, John said calmly, we can. He began typing commands into the device with incredible speed. His fingers moved across the interface like he had done this thousands of times before. What are you doing? Dr. Foster asked. This ship has more defenses than most people realize, John replied. I may have made some modifications during my last trip. Suddenly, the Golden Phoenix began to change. Hidden panels opened along the hull, revealing weapon systems that should not have existed on a civilian vessel. The ship's engines powered up to military specifications, and defensive shields activated around the entire vessel. Jake stared out the window in amazement. How is this possible? John looked up from his device. I always prepare for the worst. This ship may look like a luxury liner, but it can fight like a battleship. The Zephyrian warship detected the Golden Phoenix's new capabilities and immediately began charging its weapons. But John was ready for them. Captain Wong, John said. Into his communication device. This is Keanu Reeves. I'm taking tactical control of the defensive systems. Please follow my instructions exactly. On the bridge, Captain Wong almost fell out of her chair. The man she had been reading about in the classified files was actually on her ship, and now he was offering to save them all. Mr. Keanu Reeves, she said, I'm honored to have you aboard. The ship is yours to command. Admiral Vextar watched his tactical display in disbelief as the human luxury ship transformed into a formidable opponent. Impossible, he growled. How did they hide such weapons? Admiral, his commander said nervously, our sensors are detecting military-grade shields and weapon systems. This is not a civilian vessel. Vextar's eyes narrowed. The architect planned this. He knew we would find him eventually, so he prepared. The alien warship fired its first volley of weapons at the Golden Phoenix, but John was ready. The ship's new defensive systems absorbed the energy blasts like they were nothing more than flashlight beams. Now it's our turn, John said quietly, his fingers dancing across the tactical controls. The Golden Phoenix fired back, its hidden weapons striking the Zephyrian ship with devastating accuracy. The aliens had been the hunters, but now they were about to become the hunted. The Golden Phoenix fired its hidden weapons at the massive Zephyrian warship, and the alien vessel shook under the impact. Admiral Vextar stumbled as his bridge trembled around him. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and emergency lights began flashing throughout the alien ship. Damage report. Vextar shouted to his crew. Heavy damage to forward shields, his commander replied. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. How is this possible? Their ship is only 1/10 our size. Vextar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The human luxury liner was not only surviving his attacks, but it was winning the battle. The architect, he growled. This is his work. Inside the Golden Phoenix, John Keanu Reeves sat calmly in his passenger seat, his fingers moving across the tactical control device. With incredible skill, the simple handheld computer was connected to every weapon system and defensive grid on the ship through hidden networks he had installed months earlier. The other passengers watched in amazement as John commanded the battle like a master conductor, leading an orchestra. Every movement of his hands resulted in precise weapons fire or perfectly timed defensive maneuvers. How are you doing this? Dr. Amanda Foster asked, staring at the tactical display on John's device. Experience, John replied without looking up. I've been fighting wars since I was 20 years old. The Zephyrians use the same attack patterns they've used for decades. They never learn. Jake Morrison and Danny Clark stood frozen in the aisle, watching the man they had been humiliating save their lives with casual ease. The alien warship was easily 3 times the size of any human battleship, but John was making it look helpless. This is impossible, Jake whispered. How can one person control an entire ship's weapons? Ryan Palmer, the tech billionaire, was studying John's device with professional interest. That's not a standard computer, he said. The processing power required for those calculations would need a supercomputer the size of a building. John glanced at Ryan and smiled slightly. I made some improvements to the basic design. The Zephyrian warship tried to retreat, backing away from the Golden Phoenix while continuing to fire its weapons. But John anticipated every move the aliens made. Captain Wong, John said into his communication device, bring us around to their port side. They have a weakness in their shield grid near the main engine. How do you know that? Captain Wang asked from the bridge. I studied their ship designs after the Battle of Centauri Station, John replied. Every Zephyrian cruiser has the same flaw. The Golden Phoenix moved with surprising grace for such a large ship. John's modifications had improved not just the weapons and shields, but also the engines and maneuvering systems. The ship danced around the alien vessel like it was performing a ballet. Admiral Vextar watched his tactical display with growing fear. The human ship was moving in ways that should have been impossible. It was faster than his warship, more maneuverable, and its weapons were striking with perfect accuracy. Sir, his commander said nervously, our shields are failing. We need to retreat. No, Vextar shouted. We have been hunting the architect for 5 years. I will not let him escape again. But John was not planning to escape. He was planning to end the threat once and for all. Dr. Foster, John said, could you please record a message for me? Of course, she replied, pulling out her personal recording device. John looked directly into the camera. Admiral Vextar, this is John Connor Reeves. I know you can receive our communications. I want you to listen carefully. On the alien ship, Vextar's eyes widened as the human architect's face appeared on his main screen. You have been hunting me for 5 years, John continued. You blame me for the deaths of your warriors. But those warriors died because they were trying to invade human worlds and kill innocent people. I only defended my own species. John's voice was calm but firm. I could destroy your ship right now. My weapons are locked onto your main reactor, and your shields cannot stop them. But I'm going to give you a choice. The alien bridge fell silent as everyone listened to John's words. You can retreat now and return to your own territory, John said. Or you can continue fighting, and I will make sure your ship never threatens another human again. The choice is yours. Admiral Vextar stared at the human's face on his screen. In 5 years of hunting, he had never actually seen the architect before. He had expected a large, fierce warrior. Instead, he saw a quiet man with kind eyes who spoke like a teacher rather than a soldier. You are not what I expected, Vextar said. I never wanted to be a warrior, John replied. But sometimes good people have to fight to protect others. Your empire has killed millions of humans. I won't let that continue. The alien admiral looked at his damaged ship and his frightened crew. His weapons were useless against the humans' defenses, and his shields were almost completely destroyed. Continuing the fight would mean certain death for everyone aboard his vessel. What guarantee do I have that you will let us go? Vextar asked. You have my word, John said simply. I only kill when I have no other choice. Inside the Golden Phoenix, Jake was listening to the conversation with amazement. The man he had treated like garbage was showing mercy to enemies who had come to kill them all. I don't understand, Jake said to Dr. Foster. Why doesn't he just destroy them? They tried to kill us. Because he's a better person than you are. Dr. Foster replied coldly. Victoria Hayes was also watching John with new respect. In all my years of business, I've never seen anyone handle a crisis with such calm control. Ryan Palmer nodded. He's not just fighting them. He's teaching them that humans can be both strong and merciful. Admiral Vextar made his decision. Very well. Architect, we will retreat. But this is not over. My government will send other ships to hunt you. Let them come, John said quietly. I'll be ready. The massive Zephyrian warship slowly turned away from the Golden Phoenix. Its engines glowed brighter as it prepared to jump back into hyperspace. Wait, John said suddenly. Admiral, before you go, I want you to take a message back to your leaders. What message? Vextar asked. John looked directly into the camera again. Tell them that humanity is not weak. Tell them that we will defend ourselves against any threat. And tell them that as long as I'm alive, any attack on human worlds will fail. The alien ship disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the Golden Phoenix alone among the stars. Captain Wang's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, the threat has passed. We are safe, thanks to our passenger in seat 12A. The passengers began to applaud, but John was already putting away his tactical device. He looked tired, like the battle had drained more than just his energy. "Mr. Keanu Reeves," Dr. Foster said, "that was incredible. You single-handedly defeated a warship 10 times our size." "I had help," John replied, gesturing toward the ship around them. "And I couldn't have done it without Captain Wang and her crew." Jake Morrison stood in the aisle, staring at John with a mixture of shame and awe. The man he had humiliated was the greatest hero in human history. The man he had tried to give to the aliens had just saved all their lives. "Sir," Jake said quietly, "I owe you an apology." John looked at him with the same patient expression he had shown all along. "You don't owe me anything, Jake, but maybe you owe yourself some time to think about how you treat other people." The Golden Phoenix resumed its journey toward the Proxima Centauri system, carrying its passengers safely through the darkness of space. But now everyone aboard knew they were traveling with a legend. The Golden Phoenix traveled peacefully through space for the next 2 hours. The emergency lights had been turned off, and the ship's normal lighting returned. Passengers were slowly beginning to relax after the terrifying encounter with the alien warship. John Keanu Reeves sat in his original seat, looking out at the stars as if nothing unusual had happened. His tactical device was put away, and he had returned to his quiet, humble appearance. To anyone who had not witnessed the battle, he looked like just another passenger, but everyone aboard the ship now knew the truth. Captain Lisa Wang left the bridge and walked down to the passenger area. She had never met a living legend before, and she wanted to personally thank the man who had saved her ship and crew. "Mr. Keanu Reeves," she said as she approached John's seat, "I cannot express how grateful I am for what you did today." John looked up at her with a gentle smile. "You and your crew did all the hard work, Captain. I just provided some tactical advice." "Tactical advice?" Captain Wang laughed. "Sir, you single-handedly defeated one of the most powerful warships in the galaxy. You saved hundreds of lives today." Other passengers were gathering around to listen to the conversation. Ryan Palmer, Victoria Hayes, and Dr. Amanda Foster all wanted to meet the man who had performed such an incredible feat. "Mr. Keanu Reeves," Ryan Palmer said, "I've read about some of your inventions in technology journals. The quantum processing systems you designed are 50 years ahead of anything else in existence." "You're too kind," John replied modestly. Victoria Hayes stepped forward. "My family's mining operations use the security systems you created. They've saved countless lives on dangerous planets." Dr. Foster nodded enthusiastically. "The research facility where I work exists because of the defensive shields you designed. Without your protection, we never could have established colonies in hostile star systems." John seemed uncomfortable with all the attention and praise. "I just did what needed to be done. Anyone in my position would have made the same choices." "No," Dr. Foster said firmly. "Not anyone could have done what you did. You didn't just save us today. You've been saving humanity for over a decade." While the important passengers were praising John, Jake Morrison stood at the back of the group feeling smaller and smaller. Everything he thought he knew about judging people had been proven completely wrong. Danny Clark stood next to Jake, equally ashamed. "I can't believe we treated him so badly," Danny whispered. "I know," Jake replied quietly. "I've never been so wrong about anything in my life." Captain Wang noticed Jake standing at the edge of the group. "Mr. Morrison," she called out, "I think you have something to say to our hero." All eyes turned to Jake, and he felt his face burning with embarrassment. The man he had humiliated, the man he had tried to give to the aliens, had just saved everyone on the ship. Jake walked slowly toward John's seat. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he finally reached John, he could barely look him in the eye. "Mr. Keanu Reeves," Jake began, his voice shaking, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life." John looked up at him with the same patient expression he had shown throughout the entire journey. "You don't need to apologize, Jake." "Yes, I do," Jake insisted. "I treated you terribly from the moment you stepped onto this ship. I judged you by your clothes and your appearance. I gave you bad service, cold food, and said horrible things to you." The other passengers listened in silence as Jake continued. His confession. "When the aliens came," Jake said, "I even suggested that we should give you to them to save ourselves. I was willing to sacrifice an innocent person to protect my own life." Jake's voice cracked with emotion. "And all the time, you were the greatest hero in human history. You were the reason my family is still alive on Earth. You were the reason any of us are alive at all." John stood up from his seat and faced Jake. Directly, "Jake, I want you to understand something important. What you did was wrong, but it doesn't make you a bad person. Fear makes people do things they wouldn't normally do." "But I wasn't just afraid," Jake protested. "I was mean to you. Before the aliens ever showed up. I treated you badly because I thought you were poor and unimportant. And what did you learn from that?" John asked gently. Jake thought for a moment. "I learned that a person's worth has nothing to do with their clothes or their money. I learned that treating people badly says more about me than it does about them." John nodded approvingly. "That's a valuable lesson. Most people never learn it at all. How can you forgive me so easily?" Jake asked. "After everything I did to you?" John looked around at all the passengers who were listening. "Because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. And because everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday." Dr. Foster stepped forward. "Mr. Keanu Reeves, could I ask you something? Why do you travel like this? Why don't you use military transport or government ships?" John smiled sadly. "Because I wanted to remember what normal life feels like. I've spent so many years fighting wars and designing weapons that I sometimes forget there are good people in the universe worth protecting." He looked at Jake again. "Even when people make mistakes, even when they're afraid or selfish, they still deserve to live in peace. That's why I do what I do." Captain Wong cleared her throat. "Mr. Keanu Reeves, I would be honored to upgrade you to our finest suite for the remainder of the journey. It's the least we can do." "Thank you, Captain. But I'm comfortable where I—" John replied. "I don't need special treatment." "But sir," Victoria Hayes protested, "you're the most important person on this ship. You should have the best of everything." John shook his head. "The most important people on this ship are the ones who choose to be kind to others, even when they don't have to be. The most important people are the ones who learn from their mistakes and try to be better." He looked directly at Jake. "Jake, I want you to have my address. After this trip is over, I'd like you to visit me sometime. I think you could be a good man if you had the right guidance." Jake's eyes filled with tears. "You would really want to see me again? After how I treated you?" "Everyone deserves a second chance," John said. "The question is what you'll do with yours." Danny Clark stepped forward nervously. "Mr. Keanu Reeves, I helped Jake treat you badly. I'm sorry too." "Apology accepted, Danny," John said kindly. "But remember, following someone else's bad example is still a choice. Next time, think for yourself." Captain Wong made an announcement over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be arriving at Proxima Centauri station in 4 hours. I want to personally thank our passenger John Keanu Reeves for his heroic actions today." The entire ship erupted in applause, but John just smiled quietly and returned to his seat. As the Golden Phoenix continued its journey, Jake began his duties with a completely different attitude. He served every passenger with respect and kindness. remembering John's lesson about treating all people with dignity. When they finally arrived at Proxima Centauri station, John gathered his small bag and prepared to leave the ship. A crowd of passengers had gathered to say goodbye to him. "Mr. Keanu Reeves," Dr. Foster said, "it has been the honor of my lifetime to meet you." "The honor was mine, Dr. Foster," John replied. "Keep doing your important research. The galaxy needs scientists like you." He shook hands with Ryan Palmer and Victoria Hayes, thanking them for their kindness during the journey. Finally, he approached Jake one last time. "Remember what you learned today, Jake, and remember that every person you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about. Treat them all with respect." "I will, sir," Jake promised. "Thank you for showing me what a real hero looks like." John walked down the boarding ramp and disappeared into the crowd at the space station. To anyone watching, he looked like just another ordinary traveler. But the passengers of the Golden Phoenix would never forget the humble man who had saved their lives and taught them the true meaning of heroism. Jake Morrison continued working as a flight attendant, but he was changed forever. He treated every passenger with respect and kindness, regardless of their appearance or social status. And sometimes when he met travelers who seemed lost or lonely, he would remember John's words about everyone deserving dignity and respect. The universe was a dangerous place, full of threats and challenges. But it was also full of heroes like John Keanu Reeves, who chose to protect others even when it put them in danger. And it was full of people like Jake Morrison, who could learn from their mistakes and become better than they ever thought possible. The Golden Phoenix continued its journey through the stars, carrying new passengers to distant worlds. But for those who had been aboard during that historic voyage, the memory of the humble hero would last forever.